there's
Yeah,
a,
1, 2, 3, 4,
it's
we have 5.
sloped at about a 45-degree
Oh, no, it's not
angle
that steep.
and an
No.
open driveway.
No, it's about 10 feet, but it's all getting, most of it's getting water, and there's a detention system underneath that parking lot.
I hope so,
Oh, there
because
is
that's
there.
gonna be a major flood.
No, it's in there, it's all,
We came by there today and I
Yeah.
looked at that.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
It's about 45 degrees.
It's
That water's
steep,
gonna
yeah.
run down there like a,
yeah, but they have, it's all underground, it's all underneath there.
Okay.
There's a whole back.
it looked like a possible.
Oh, I know.
Problem.
Yeah, I know, no, we're good, they're okay. No surfing.
We don't want him either.
I saw an environmental issue.
Nah, you're good.
Yeah, but the issue is,
I wish to get that road done. The sooner the better.
Where were you? Okay, where am I? May as well pass these.
Thank you, Ken.
They just came today.
So we need,
The treasurer need one?
oh, if you wanna give one to the treasurer.
These two projects?
Yep. Like to call to order the September 9th, 2019 Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners meeting. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance to the flag, and then take a moment afterwards, please, to think of our service members, especially those overseas in harm's way. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the August public meeting? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Sharon. I'm new at this job.
Right now, Dennis is smiling.
Whitehall Township has an obligation to affirmatively further fair housing and to review all land use applications in accordance with federal civil rights statutes. This includes taking meaningful actions that overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities free from barriers that restrict access to opportunity based on protected characteristics. The township, in its land use decisions, does not discriminate against persons based on race, color, natural origin, religion, sex, disability, or familial status, and reviews all land use applications in accordance with federal civil rights statutes. Public comments made on the basis of bias and stereotype concerning people within these protected classes will not be taken into consideration by the township in its deliberations. Now, do I have approval of the minutes from the August meeting?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any comments from the board? Comments from the public? Mr. Secretary, please pull the board.
Okay, Commissioner Warren?
Aye.
Commissioner Fryman?
Yes.
Commissioner Clary?
Aye.
Commissioner Swanager? Aye. President, Vice President, I don't know, how do you do that? Oh, we'll go ahead and call you President for the night. Ginder.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes 5 ayes, 0 nays.
Public hearing and voting on conditional use. Conditional use hearing of United Liberty LLC for use of the property located at 1995 Shott Avenue, Whitehall, Pennsylvania. tax parcel ID number 549803441182-1 as a special care community. Motion before the presentation? Do I have a motion from the board?
I'll move.
Second?
I'll second.
Mr. Secretary, pull the board.
Wait, hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry, not
They
yet.
have to have a meeting
Yep.
first. Presentation.
No, that's fine.
You might not want to do that.
Here. Clyde, I'll get your chair.
Should we move the mic over or? Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris McLean. I'm from Fitzpatrick, Lenz & Luba on behalf of the applicant. With me this evening is Bud Newton of Newton Engineering, and we have the principals of the applicant with us this evening, Kaiser and Shavana Pathan, should the board have any questions of them. We're here to discuss the property located at 1995 Shot Avenue, which is the northeastern intersection of Shot Avenue and Mauchunk Road. The proposal ultimately would result in 32 age-restricted individual dwelling units laid out to look much like townhouses with a community center. Within this zoning district, which is the R3A zoning district, the use is permitted by condition, which is why we're here. I will shortly ask Mr. Newton a number of questions to demonstrate how we comply with the zoning ordinance requirements. To this point, we have received zoning variance relief from one of the applicable criteria, and Mr. Newton will explain that to everyone momentarily. And we've also received a favorable recommendation of the use from the zoning hearing board. Following the proceedings this evening, we will be preparing a development plan. And from that point, we will go through the formal process, review with the planning commission, and ultimately back in front of this board for approval of all of the engineering details. As Mr. Newton will discuss with everyone momentarily, the project does meet all of the zoning ordinance criteria, so we would request at the end of the hearing that you affirmatively vote to grant us conditional use approval. So unless anyone has any preliminary questions, I'm ready to call my first witness. Yeah. Please raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear by Almighty God the testimony you will give in this matter now before the board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Newton, please state your name for the record.
Yes, it's Harold H. Newton Jr.
And by whom are you employed?
by the Newton Engineering Group, BC.
And what is your professional background?
I'm a registered professional engineer and a registered professional land surveyor in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Okay, and do your duties regularly include reading, interpreting, and applying zoning and subdivision ordinances?
Yes, they do.
And have you appeared in front of this board and other township, Whitehall Township boards and commissions in the past?
Yes, on numerous occasions.
Okay. I would request that Mr. Newton be accepted as an expert in the field of civil engineering.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Newton, please refer to Exhibit A1, which is the plan overlaid over an aerial picture. Can you just describe where the property is located and some of the surrounding uses, please?
Yes, this is on the northeast corner of the intersection of Mock Chunk Road and Shot Avenue. This is property that had previously been owned by Esau Joseph, and it's been here in front of the township on numerous occasions for different plans. The property on the opposite side of Shot Avenue is Watrings, where they do auto vehicle repairs. To the east, on the south side of Shot, is the mosque. On the north side is the Korean church. To the north and northeast of the property is Fellowship Manor. On the opposite side of Mock Chunk Road is property that's also owned by Fellowship Manor, and also a few single-family homes.
And the zoning district is R3A, if I'm correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you mentioned Fellowship Manor. That's a similar but much more significantly sized community than what we are proposing.
Yes, it's similar from the standpoint that it is a special care community such as what we're proposing here, although they have multiple types of uses as opposed to this case, we're just gonna have active adult.
Okay. And if you would kindly flip over the exhibit to Exhibit A2,
Were you retained to prepare a conceptual layout plan for development of the property?
Yes, over the years, we have done a number of plans, and this is the latest plan that we've put together after significant input from the township staff and our clients.
Just describe, if you could, for the board, what they're looking at, say, from left to right on the plan.
Yes, what we're looking for is a plan that has two access points, one onto Mock Chunk Road, one onto Shad Avenue. Both of those roadways are state highways, so we will need to get PennDOT highway occupancy permits for them. We tried to stay as far away from the traffic signal as we can, because PennDOT's gonna require that. And then also, in regard to the access on the Shad Avenue, we had to put that at the highest point on the property so that you have adequate sight distance. We are proposing, to have this as, the streets designed as a public road to meeting township road standards. And we're proposing to have 32 units. They will be condominium-type units. They're approximately 26-foot wide by 60-foot long, with an outdoor area for each of them. It's a crosshatch area in the rear, and then also part of the unit will be the driveways in the front yard to the units. The remainder of the property will be common open space that's gonna be owned by a homeowners association that will have general maintenance responsibilities for everything except for the units.
And we're not yet at the point, but there will be a stormwater management system and appropriate design when we get to land development?
That's correct.
Okay. Prior to submitting the conditional use application, did you meet with township staff to identify issues with the potential conditional use of the property?
Yes, and as I mentioned, we had been in front of the township on several occasions with discussions of alternate plans for this property. I think even Mr. Joseph at one time had proposed a convenience store on the property. We had looked for more residential development. We were trying to see if it made some sense to possibly rezone this as R4. But it was all said and done, I think the decision was to stick with the R3A zoning and go with this active adult project.
And we're referring to it as an active adult, it's still the special care community as defined in the ordinance, correct?
That is one of the categories of special
Yep.
care.
Okay. And in meeting with the township staff, was one of the purposes of that meeting to identify potential zoning issues and/or variances needed?
That's correct. We had a meeting with staff, we viewed the plan, and then we followed that up with a concept plan that was submitted to staff for their review and comment.
And there was only one zoning issue identified at that time?
Yes, the overall area for this type of development would require 10 acres. We're limited by the property that's available there, which started out about 7.15 acres, and after possible dedications of right-of-ways, et cetera, I think we were at 6.41 acres.
And we'll get to the details on that momentarily, but the zoning hearing board did grant a variance from the minimum lot size requirement?
That's correct.
Okay. And project otherwise comply with all of the zoning ordinances criteria?
That's correct. According to the review that was done by township staff, that was all that was identified.
And the planning commission did recommend that this board approve the conditional use?
That's correct.
Okay. Let's talk about some of these specific criteria in the zoning ordinance found at section 27-141 of the ordinance. The development is proposed for a single tax parcel, correct?
That's correct.
Right. And what exactly are the residential and support uses as defined in this section of the zoning ordinance that will be part of the the special care community?
The main thing is going to be that there will be these 32 independent dwelling units that will be condominium-type units owned by the individual property owners, but the individual property owners will be part of the homeowners association, which will be responsible for maintenance of the common elements.
And will there be common kitchen and dining facilities in the proposed community center?
Yes, it is proposed that we will have a community center that will be eligible for use by all the members of the community, and we'll have dining facilities, and we'll have other amenities for those residents.
Recreational type amenities and those kinds of things?
That's correct.
And I think you touched on this, but just to be clear, will the community be exclusively for qualified persons as that term is defined in the ordinance?
That's correct.
And the homeowners association contemplates, I think, but again, just to be clear for the record, will there be a single managing body of, governing this community?
Yes.
And will there be deed restrictions to ensure common development, management, and responsibility with respect to the community?
That's correct.
You talked about the proposed size of the units as part of your introductory explanation, but could you talk about the size of the buildings and the actual physical structures themselves?
Yes, we're looking at a unit that, rather than what you may see in some projects, will look more like a townhouse project. They'll have 2-car garages, they're approximately 26-foot wide units, 60-foot deep units. Some may have basements, some may have lofts. As I said, there will be 2-car garages. Each unit, we're also going to include an outdoor area in the rear for patio deck type arrangement that'll be of limited common element. Will be owned by the property unit owner. And then also, we are providing additional parking beyond what the ordinance requires. We'll have a minimum of 2 cars in the garage and a minimum of 2 cars in the driveway. That will be limited common elements and be specific for that unit. And then in addition, we have additional parking at the community center for if you have visitors and guests and someone else where you need more parking than just what you would have on site on each individual unit.
And are these units going to be 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom units? Or some mixture of both?
There's going to be a mixture of number of bedrooms.
And will the 1-bedroom units exceed 500 square feet of minimal habitable floor space?
Yes,
And will the 2-bedroom units exceed 700 square feet of minimum habitable floor space?
yes, they do.
Okay. And we talked earlier about the fact that the lot size is less than 10 acres and the zoning hearing board granted a variance. To your knowledge, was the zoning decision appealed?
Not to my knowledge.
So it is final and binding?
That's correct.
And what is, we haven't fully engineered the project, but will we meet the requirement that no more than 45% of the gross area of the tract will be covered by buildings?
That's correct. I think we'll be a good bit under the 45%.
Are there going to be any retail, personal service, or professional shops or office included as part of the community?
No, this is intended to just be the residential project.
And can you describe for the board what the open space looks like as we are currently envisioning?
Yeah, this will be finalized during the land development phase, but some of the things that we're proposing is the community center with the parking. There will probably be some outdoor amenities that are associated with that. A lot of times in these projects, we're doing like maybe a basketball court or a tennis court or bocce courts or volleyball or something like that type use. We also are looking to, with our stormwater management, we're going to have a combination retention, detention pond, probably be a wet pond. And one of the things that is happening in a lot of these projects that we're doing with the wet ponds is the communities using them as an amenity. We've had a number of these where they go back and stock the wet basin and so they can use it for fishing and stuff. And so if some person that's in the active adult products, grandchildren come over, they can go in and fish in there and stuff. So that's been working out pretty well in some of these communities that we're doing. In fact, actually it helps with the water quality.
And recognizing we haven't designed the project from an engineering perspective, we have the two-dimensional sketch. Will we comply with the ordinance requirement that 25% of the gross tract will be dedicated to common open space?
That's correct.
And of that 25%, 70% will be designated for passive use.
Yes.
Would you just describe for the board what the proposed setbacks from the perimeter of the site and the proposed road look like?
Yeah, since it's going to be a condominium project, the setbacks are set off the perimeter of the property, and our interpretation of the ordinance and based on the zoning review is that we would have to have a 40-foot setback from all the property lines of the property, and also 40-foot setback from the right-of-way of the public roads.
And we've talked about a number of dimensional area items in the last few minutes. Are all of those issues compliant with the requirements of the zoning ordinance?
It's our intent to comply.
And will the buildings be compliant with the height limitation of 35 feet or 3 stories?
Yes, they will.
Talk to the board a little bit about the proposed density of the project.
The density is a lot less than what would have been, we would have had with some of the previous plans. We had a townhouse plan at one time that showed like 56 units on this property, but as a result of going back through and looking at market conditions, looking at the best use of this property and the active adult use, it was determined that these 32 units would be the best arrangement.
And the ordinance would allow up to 18 independent dwelling units per acre, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we're obviously very significantly
Much less
under.
than that.
Turning to the arrangement of the buildings as shown on Exhibit A2, are all of the buildings, but for the community center, arranged in groupings?
Yes, they are.
And what are the separation distances between those buildings?
We were meant to comply with the ordinance. I think the ordinance requires a 50-foot separation.
Okay. And the question is going to be very specific, but it's to address a specific criteria of the ordinance. Will each dwelling unit have access to natural light, meaning that will the angle off horizontal from the sill of the lowest window to the highest point of another building, excluding towers, chimneys, and similar fixtures, exceed 45%?
I believe we will comply with that.
Okay, that's what we needed to hear. Do the front of any of these dwelling units face the rear of any other unit?
No, they do not.
Will stairways, stairwells, and landings be architecturally integrated into the agreement?
They
Or,
will,
excuse me, into the
into the
buildings?
building, they will be.
And will the project comply with applicable laws concerning antenna, satellite dishes, those kinds of things?
Yes, it is the intent.
Okay. Concerning the building layout details that we've addressed, are all of these compliant with the requirements of the ordinance?
To the best of our knowledge and the feedback we've received from staff.
Okay. Will each unit include 35 continuous square feet of storage space for the owner or occupant?
Yes, that'll be incorporated into the building design.
Okay. And that's in the actual individual unit itself and not in the community facility?
That's correct.
Are the buildings intended to be wheelchair accessible?
Yes, they are.
And will there be fire, life safety, and security systems pre-wired into each of the units?
Yes, it's intended that these buildings will comply with building code requirements as far as fire safety and the smoke detectors and all other types of security that's required for this type of unit.
Okay. You talked earlier about how the parking will work between the garage and the driveways. Just referencing Exhibit A2, can you talk a little bit about the parking and the access ways for the community center, please?
Well, first, to expand on what we talked about with the unit themselves, on that exhibit that you have on the upper right-hand corner, there is a mock-up of the unit, and we did do something a little bit different here. We wanted to keep the width of the driveways down, and since we had to be 40 feet back from the street right-of-way, we're having a 12-foot entrance coming off the street and then expanding out to allow for 2 parking spaces in front of the garage and then 2 spaces in the garage. So that's a little bit unique, and it gives us a better area to put our street trees and some of the other amenities that you would have in the front yard area. With the community center right now, we have 1 driveway between the set of units going back to a common parking lot that has 11 parking spaces. 2 of them will be ADA accessible spaces.
And do the parking areas and access ways comply with the separation distances and other dimensional requirements of the zoning ordinance?
To the best of our knowledge, they do.
Okay. And you briefly touched on the street earlier, that it will be designed and constructed per SALDO standards. What is the intention for the street?
It is intended that it be a public road.
Okay, and that's obviously something we would work out with the board during the land development process.
Yes, one of the things that was discussed with it being public or private was, right now, if there was an accident at the intersection of Mock Chunk and Shot, traffic was stopped there, this would provide a emergency access way around that intersection.
Okay. And I guess to that point, explain, if you would, how does the design of the road minimize hazards to pedestrian and vehicles within the community and on adjacent streets?
We are proposing to have, the road designed to public standards. We will need PennDOT HOP for both intersections with Shot Avenue and Mock Chunk Road, so we will meet all the latest design criteria for that. We are proposing to have sidewalks throughout the community, along the streets, and also internally to the community center. And you will have a means of being able to get from Mock Chunk Road to Shot Avenue via sidewalk.
And will those sidewalks and walkways internal to the community comply with the ordinance requirements in terms of dimension, construction materials, et cetera?
Yes, they will.
Right. And are there going to be crosswalks proposed anywhere?
Yes, they will be.
And are those, how do you determine where those go?
It's something that will be worked out during land development. We have some conceptual ideas shown on this plan right now. We will work them out with staff as we're going through the land development process.
But we will have crosswalks as required.
Yes.
And can you describe how the trash will be handled for the common areas?
It's not intended that this be, with only 32 units, we're not at the point that we feel that we're going to need to have dumpsters or anything, so we're figuring that the trash for the clubhouse will be handled the same way as for the individual units with standard garbage type cans and pick up by the, normal pickup like you would have for the residential properties.
So the township's contracted hauler would take the garbage
That's the
away
current intent.
for both the residential units themselves and the community.
That's the intent.
Will there be lighting proposed internally to the project?
Yes, we'll have the typical street lights that comply with street light standards.
Okay, so, and they will comply to ensure there's no hazard to pedestrians or vehicles?
That's correct.
And if needed, will they be shielded to avoid glare into residences and adjacent properties?
Yeah, we really don't have much as far as residents that are close to the property, but they will be designed to be downshining lights and will be dark sky type lights.
Very good. Can you, in a narrative form, describe for the board what the landscaping will look like for the project?
Yes, it's intended that we'll comply with all the landscape requirements. We will have street trees, we will have parking lot trees. We will be doing buffering around the detention retention pond. And it's intended that this be a high-level project, so we'll have other landscaping that will help enhance the common areas.
Okay, so between the buildings and approaches and entrances to buildings will be landscaped?
Yes, you'll have you'll have the packages that each individual property owner will have, but in addition, you'll have landscaping in the common areas.
And anything that is not non-impervious surface is intended to be landscaped or seeded so that it's in a stabilized condition?
That's correct.
And can you describe for the board how the utilities, public water and sewer will be provided?
Yes, we've had, as far as water and sewer, we've met with the Whitehall Water Authority. They have a 20-inch water main that runs through the property. We're going to loop into that at 2 points. Our main water line is going to follow the roadway and probably end up being an 8-inch main that will loop between two sections of 20 inches. There's a 20-inch on Mock Chunk, and there's a 20-inch on Shot Avenue that goes through this property. We're going to loop into that and connect each of the buildings. As far as the sanitary, it's a little bit different than normal. We've had meetings with Whitehall Copley Sewer Authority. You can't get gravity sewer to this property. So what was decided to do is we are going to do a low-pressure sanitary sewer force main that's going to be owned and operated by the homeowners association. And each of the individual units are going to have a pump station, their own individual pump station that's going to tie into the system. And then the system's going to go up to the top of the hill where we will have a gravity system that ties to the authority line. So there'll only be one connection to the public facilities. And we're working out the details of that with the Copley Whitehall Sewer Authority right now.
Okay. And will the other utilities provided for the community be underground?
Yes, they will be.
Okay. And is there any phasing proposed for the project?
No, there is not.
That addresses all of the specific requirements of section 141 of the ordinance. I'd like to turn our attention now to section 45E, which are the general requirements applicable to all conditional uses. Is this project in accordance with the comprehensive plan?
Based on my review of the comprehensive plan, I believe it is.
Including under the land use and housing objectives to encourage a variety of housing types and encourage adult residential communities limited to residents 55 and older?
That's correct.
And is the project in the spirit, intent, and purpose of the zoning ordinance?
That's correct.
And this is a bit of a loaded question, Bud, but is the project in the best interest of the township?
In my interpretation and from my professional experience, I think it is. It does provide alternate type of residential property. It expands on some of the current uses in the area. It will allow for more, these active adult projects have become a traditional, a more transitional type of housing in the area where people want to downsize, go from their single-family homes to a smaller type housing type, and it gives them an alternative where you have common maintenance and things that make it easier for the property owners to maintain. And it does provide for tax revenues for both the school district and the township, but it's not going to have any additional burden on the school district as far as having more students or anything like that.
In your professional opinion, is it suitable for the site on which we're proposed to locate it?
Yes, I kind of think that's probably, based on some of the various options that have been looked at this property for over the years, I think this is probably the best use for the property.
And has the community been designed to be in harmony with adjacent properties?
That's correct.
And we've talked about extension of utilities and impact, non-impact rather, on schools. To the extent we are extending utilities and the road network, is it a logical expansion and extension of those facilities?
Yes, and again, this is something that we spent a good bit of time over the years working out with the authorities, and I think we have the best plan now that we can that satisfies both their needs and our needs.
Given the other uses that had been contemplated for the site, is this the most appropriate use from a traffic generation standpoint?
Yes, you know, the active adult projects that by their nature generate less traffic than a standard housing project would, and now that we've reduced the density down to 32 units, it's certainly a lot less traffic than what you would be getting if you would end up with like a convenience store or some other use in that corner.
Will the proposed use increase danger of fire or otherwise endanger public safety in any way?
I don't see any reason why it would, because the buildings are gonna be built to comply with all fire code, building code requirements.
And would the proposed project overcrowd the land or create an undue concentration of population?
As we mentioned before, we're much lower than the 45% building coverage that is allowed by the ordinance, so I do not feel that we will have an impact on this.
And will there be any negative impact to the supply of light or air to adjacent properties?
No, there should not be.
Will the use unduly burden water, sewer, school, park, or other public facilities?
No, I think we've been able to get commitments from both water and sewer for the utilities that we need. As we said, we're not gonna add many more school children. As far as the parks and other public facilities, we will have our on-site facilities for the people, so I think you'll probably have less burden than what we would have if this was a standard townhouse project.
And the two access points to the state highway system, we will obviously obtain occupancy permits to minimize any impact from ingress and egress.
Yes, we will.
Generally speaking, will there be any adverse effect on health, safety, or public welfare?
I do not see anything, you know, this is gonna be a very standard type development. It's designed to comply with all the rules and regulations, so I do not think that there will be any problems.
And in compliance with the rules and regulations? Yep, okay. Will the use interfere or encroach on any wetlands or floodplains?
No, none have been identified.
And it's generally consistent with surrounding zoning and land uses?
Yes, we did design this to be in compliance with the R3A zoning, except for where we have received the zoning relief.
Yep. And so there'd be no detriment to the use of the adjoining properties?
Should not be.
That's all the questions I have for Mr. Newton.
Attorney Murray, do you have any questions, or do you wish the board to go first?
The board can go first.
Questions from the board?
All right,
Go ahead, Jeff.
just run a general question. The public road, does that trigger a subdivision if it becomes a public road versus a private road?
Yes.
It does, and that does that impact our decision here today?
I'll let the attorney answer that one.
There are questions as to whether it may impact the existing zoning relief. Because the zoning was granted upon 6.41 and some change acres. And if this was subdivided and dedicated, that would reduce the acreage of the property.
Okay. Parking, just clarification, you said 2 units per garage, is it 2 garage parking spots per unit, or is it a shared garage?
Now, each unit is individual. They each will have a 2-car garage, and then there'll be a minimum of 2 spaces outside of the garage.
And the last question, Jack, for homeowner associations, do we do trash for them? We don't.
No, it's more.
They
than
can
3
contract
units.
with our own contractor?
They would have to have their own contractor.
That's all right now.
Okay, you have a whopping 11 parking spaces here for this community center. And how many units are there?
32.
And you said that they're gonna have avail to them luncheon and whatnot for food and whatnot, or did I mishear that?
Yeah, the intent, though, is to have it as much as be a walkable community as we can. If you could see, we do have pathways from the back, from the units to the clubhouse and stuff, so We think that the residents will primarily, take advantage of those facilities. We want to make as walkable a community as we can.
And I understand that that's wonderful in the spring and the nice fall
Yes.
weather. But when we get into, where it's really cold and everything, that doesn't work in my head. Again, you're talking about people that, hey,
Yeah,
part of
yeah,
the
we-
reason they want to move to a place like this is so that things are easier.
Yeah.
Okay, and I just can't see that you really have 9 parking spaces, because 2 are for handicap.
Yeah, this is we're doing a number of active adult projects. This is a fairly consistent ratio, but we certainly can look at adding additional spaces during the land development process.
What does that mean?
That if as we're going into final design on this, if it's decided that we should have, 20 spaces, we'll go through and provide 20 spaces at that time. Or if we should have 25 spaces, we'll look at doing that at that time.
What would determine that then? I mean, you already have in here, it's gonna be 11, and as we're going along, we'll figure out if we need more.
Well, I think as proposed, it complies with the ordinance requirements. We recognize the board may have a concern, the planning commission may have a concern, your professional staff may have a concern, and so we're willing to take that into consideration as we finalize the ultimate design and bring it back as part of that land development process.
But you honestly think that 9 spaces and 2 handicap, that's 11. You expect people to say, hey, it's time to go eat lunch, it's time to go eat dinner. Oh, we better get there so we can park? I said, I'm just looking at who might be going
Again,
there.
like I said, this is fairly consistent with the other active adult projects we have going on, but we'll certainly look at that when we get into the land development. If planning commission feels we need more, we'll look at adding that. Because right now, we haven't totally designed the stormwater facilities. They could actually be a lot smaller than what they are shown on the plan, and the parking lot could get bigger, or we could add parking at some other areas on the plan if it's deemed to be necessary. Because there really is no criteria in your zoning ordinance that covers, this type of use. So we're certainly open for discussion during the land development process.
And what I'm looking at here is that the property that's adjacent to you, they had parking, and then they realized they needed more parking because they had events there and whatnot. And the way I was told about this is that this would be able to be utilized by some of the people who live there, that they could say, hey, we're gonna have a birthday party.
Yes.
And depending upon, now, and again, you sort of, when you're talking, was like, oh, well, this isn't gonna be like with people that, have children and everything. Well, I'm looking at it the other way. These are gonna be people with an extended family, so when there is a birthday party, you're gonna see a lot of people coming. And, for grandma, grandpa, whatever. And again, I just wouldn't think that that would be enough, nor do I, if they're gonna avail themselves to just using the community center, it just doesn't, to me, it just doesn't look enough. Now, if they say, hey, we're not gonna use the community center, we're gonna have it at our house. The width of the road here, how are they gonna have people parking on both sides of the road and be able to get through?
This, like I said, the roads will be designed to your standards. We have a 35-foot cartway, 55-foot right-of-way. There will be areas that would be available for on-street parking in between the units.
But you don't have actual room because of the way that your design here is, that you're gonna be able to park without parking in front of somebody else's driveway.
Now,
So-
what typically is done with a 35-foot wide street is you will mark out the spaces between the driveways. And as part of the land development plan, we can develop a parking plan for the on-street parking.
But you don't have a parking plan right now,
We don't have it shown on this.
okay? And again, I'm just looking at what potentially will happen here, that just knowing that when people get older and the children have left, now they come back by the with the regular children, plus the other children, plus the grandchildren, plus, and again, right now, I just don't see where it would work.
Yeah,
With,
that-
and
that-
again, I'm not saying there's a birthday party every day either, I'm aware of that, but,
That's the reason, Tom, that we added a lot more spaces for each of the driveways and stuff too. Like, so we do exceed what your ordinance requires for parking for each of the individual units. So
And-
we are providing a lot more spaces
and
there
I,
than
I
typical.
was, I heard that the last time, we'll be able to use the neighbors, we'll ask them.
No,
I'm telling you, it's not as
Yeah.
friendly out there sometimes as what you would think.
Agreed.
So it's not like you're gonna be able to say, hey, Charlie, I'm gonna be bringing over the family. They're gonna take up all the spaces here on the street. And again, that, just sort of what I just see it, and part of what we get complaints on is traffic and whatnot. And the other thing that I have for you now, you said you're gonna have sidewalks running through this, road that we're gonna have to take over. What about on Mock Chunk and Shot Avenue? Are you having any sidewalks out there?
there's a possibility of running sidewalk along Mock Chunk. I would not recommend running along Shot because of how steep Shot is. If we run this internal sidewalk from Mock Chunk to Shot, we can get better grades on it than what exists on on Shot right now. So that's why we were proposing this internal sidewalk system along there, but we were proposing sidewalk along Mock Chunk.
We come into these problems all the time, and since I've been on this board, have always wanted the things to be installed at this point in time, unless something can be told to me that it can't be done, or there's an awful good reason why we don't want it.
Yeah.
And just a lot of, I would think almost everybody's been on the hill. And are you sure the entrance here is far enough for people that are coming up so that they could make a left-hand turn? Is that,
We are gonna have to provide sight distance there, and we're probably gonna end up having to provide a left turn lane into that driveway off a Shot.
and that's not shown here then, right?
That'll be incorporated into the HOP plans. Yeah, but going back to your comment, Tom, the grades on Mock Chunk Road there far exceed the 8%. The internal road system, we're gonna have designed it at 8% maximum, so it makes more sense to have the sidewalk along the internal road than try to go up that section of Mock Chunk where it's real steep.
And you say that, and we get the same answer for out here on MacArthur Road. Well, nobody's gonna be walking on there, there's too many crazy people, drivers. Yet, when I go, and it doesn't matter what time of day, I'll find somebody who thinks they're gonna walk on the road. And they're taking their life at their own hands there, but that's why I've been pushing, and
that's why
I
we-
can talk to Frank, anytime there's any kind of development, I want sidewalks.
And that's why we're proposing the internal sidewalk and providing an alternative to coming up alongside of Mock Chunk.
I'll tell you right now, if somebody's walking down that road and they're going left, they're not gonna go through the thing, to come down and go left and go down, even though there's no sidewalks down before, but you're putting in a development, people over at the garage aren't.
Yep.
So,
No, if the township requires the sidewalk, we'll put it along Mock Chunk also, but we thought the internal sidewalk would be a much safer and better way of providing the pedestrian access.
okay. Have some-
Ann?
Two questions. I know Jack has said about the homeowners association would be charged with the acquiring a garbage contract. How do HOPs typically do sewer too? That if, heaven forbid, the HOP were to fold, how does that work with sewer maintenance and getting these homes?
Now, the arrangement that we have with the sewer authority right now is that the HOA will own that common force main, and each of the individual property owners will own their own pump system. And the sewer authority is going to be putting together a comprehensive agreement on what they're going to require for this sewer service. We've been in discussions with them for a couple of years of how to provide the sewer for this, and this was determined to be the best alternative.
And there was a mention too about many more children in the community. Now, if this is a qualified person is 55 years or older. Can children live in this development as well? Because in relation to the school system, there was mention that there won't be many more children added to the school system. Can children live in this development being 55 plus?
There's very specific rules and regulations that both the state and has for these active adult projects, so we're gonna have to comply with those. I think there is provisions that there can be some people there that are less than the 55, as long as their spouse is over the 55, but, and I think there's provisions for visiting children, but I don't think there's provisions for full-time
Residential.
residents of the children. We have to comply with the state rules for active adult and the definition of active adult, both your rules and the state rules.
Can I ask one question, please?
Absolutely.
Just the access points for the new road, is it your vision to allow both east and west access and departure and north and west, or north and south access?
Our initial proposal to PennDOT's going to be for both driveways to be full access. I'm kind of envisioning that because of the proximity to the traffic lights on Mock Chunk, I'm kind of envisioning that they may give us some pushback and want that driveway on the Mock Chunk to be right in, right out.
'Cause you're talking
and
about
with a
two
full
heavily
access and
traveled
shot.
roads, you know, I mean, especially.
That's something we still have to work out with PennDOT.
Anybody else?
Can I ask?
Yeah, sure, absolutely, Mike. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Newton, can you tell us exactly how many legal parking spaces could be accommodated on this road, on the public road?
I would have to go back, Mike, and look at, but the areas that you normally get them with these townhouse projects are where you don't have driveways right in front of that property. So like if you're looking at the bend there, where the road from coming off of Mock Chunk bends to Shot, there you have that area that we have marked open space, common element. You have a section of road there that you could have it. In between the units where you have the 50-foot, we have, you could get two parking spaces there. So that would have to be worked out. And I think based on what I'm hearing tonight, I will look at maybe adding a few more parking lots at a couple areas to get more off-street parking.
Yeah, it wouldn't seem that you'd be able to get even one space. Maybe you could sneak one in between the two adjacent units, but it doesn't seem like that would work based upon what I'm seeing here in your profile of the typical unit. Other question that I have, you do not have an approved agreement with Copley Whitehall Sewer Authority at this point. You said
Not at
you've
this
been-
point. We wanted to make, we're trying to get all this subjective stuff out of the way first. We had preliminary meetings, so when we went through this process about 2 years ago, we were looking at the possibility of R4. One of the concerns that the commissioners had at that time was how were you gonna have sewers? So, we have had the preliminary meetings with them to determine, they did some studies to make sure that the system on Shot Avenue could handle these 32 units, which they have determined it can. So now we're going through, we want to get the zoning out of the way, we want to get this conditional use out of the way. Then we're gonna go back and do the land development and get into the detail
Okay.
on these agreements with the water authority and the sewer authority.
All right. How do you envision the stormwater management on the site, since it is a low spot below the grade of Shot Avenue and
We're
quite a
gonna be,
bit of that?
there's a cross pipe on Mock Chunk there, we're gonna be limited to the capacity of that pipe and how much water is going to their pre-development. There is a good bit of water that comes from Fellowship Manor that comes down along Mock Chunk that goes into that pipe, and then also almost all the water from the site right now goes in that low point. We're gonna establish our retention pond just above that piping system. And, we're gonna have to comply with all the Act 167 requirements for that, and also the post-development stormwater management requirements of that.
So if I'm reading this correctly, the pipe that you're addressing for stormwater along Mock Chunk is going to be above the grade of your wet basin down there. And it would seem that this is fairly flattened through there. are you going to be digging down to establish a greater depth in that basin? Because it looks like it's going to spread pretty quickly down there.
Yeah, what we typically are doing with these wet basins that are gonna be a combination of retention, detention, and handle our post-construction stormwater. It's recommended in those designs that you maintain like a 3 or 4 foot permanent water surface elevation. And then above that, we have our post-construction stormwater management volume. So with that, you may have like 2 or 3 foot of wet area that the only way that would drain is when the pumps work for the irrigation system. Then above that, you end up with your typical detention type arrangement. So you may have a couple feet that are used for detention, and that's gonna be at the elevation of that, pretty much at the elevation of that pipe that goes across Mock Chunk Road.
Okay. What's the difference in that elevation? It's about 2 feet, 3 feet?
Well, like I said, typically, we've been getting the areas below the cross pipe, we're usually down like 5 or 6 feet below the elevation for the wet part of the basin. And then the dry part of the basin's from that elevation up. And that's all gonna be dependent on when we get into our final stormwater design.
Okay. Active adults, if I recall correctly, we're looking at 20% of the population being above 55 as a regulation from the state. Am I correct about that?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. So it's not only likely, but probably almost a surety that we'll have many people below the age of 55. And I'm just addressing Ann's question there. I heard our attorney say that there's some question about the viability of the development based upon the current standards that they're showing here as a result of the necessity to dedicate the road to the public. How much of a problem does that create for them in developing the site?
Well, I would leave that to the zoning officer to interpret,
Okay,
but my interpretation would be that it would create 2 individual parcels that combined do not meet the requirements of the zoning decision for acreage.
Situation, Sarah, where, depends how that property would be dedicated, if it's dedicated as an easement to the township, and
Or
the homeowners
fee.
association retained the underlying rights, then it would still be one lot.
It would depend on that, you're right.
And if I may, just the question that was raised about what is the percentage potentially under age 55? I believe the 20% is correct under the federal and state statutes, but your ordinance specifically defines qualified person as a person 55 years of age or older, and does not have that qualification to allow the up to 20%. So just in terms of interpreting what is allowed, it sounds to me as if it is a 0% under 55, given the terms of the ordinance. So just wanted to mention that as well.
And most of your communities that we've been involved with require that at least one of the people in the facility be 55 or older.
right, but that leaves a number below that, and you're contending that it's a 0 standard?
Well, just the first criteria of the various options to be a qualified person, which are the only permitted occupants of this type of community. Number 1 is a person 55 years of age or older. It does not say unless X% is under age 55. So I think the ordinance itself sets the bar at 55 years.
Okay, so am I hearing you say that there will be 0 people below 55 living in that facility?
I think it's our intent to comply with what your ordinance requires. If your ordinance only allows 55, I thought there might have been some exemption for spouses and stuff, but, yeah, I don't know.
There is an exception for spouses, but does say nothing about children or anything along those lines.
Okay. And we've had, it's been quite some time, but some notable failures of HOAs. What is our protection against that failure, potential failure?
So I'd be lying to you if I said that I can give you a 100% guarantee. The assurances we can give you are the assurances that we can give under the statute. That we will have the solicitor review all of the documentation up front to ensure that it meets all the legal requirements. That we will have a professional manager involved to ensure that there are appropriate assessments being made to cover all of the expenses and to assure that those assessments are being paid or collected in the event that they're not being paid. Certainly, we definitely don't want to put you into a position where you have to become involved, but the documentation will provide for you the right to become involved if it's determined and needs be. Again, we don't want to put you in that position, but those are the various things that we can provide and will provide to ensure that, knock on wood, that never becomes an issue for you.
Yeah, I know you can't give us surety, but it's a concern, and we need to be aware of that potential concern. Just wanted to
I
get that
think,
out.
Michael, that we also have learned a lot over the last 30 or 40 years where we had these
I hope so.
associations. And I think your rules and regulations and your association documents and the way they're set up today is a lot different than they were in the 60s and 70s when we were first starting to do these type of
Yep.
projects.
Okay, thanks, Phil.
Any other commissioners?
I just want to note for the record that qualified person does include a provision for spouses. So as long as it's a spouse of someone 55 and older, they may live there.
Okay.
Any other commissioners? Ann? I just have a few. Fellow commissioners and the mayor covered a lot of questions. They did a very, very thorough job on questions. First thing I want to point out is in the parking at the community center, you had said you were leaving 2 ADA spaces.
Yes.
Just a matter of cleaning up your handout here. You only have 1 marked, I believe.
Yes, you're correct.
And you mentioned there will be 2.
Yeah, but either side of that van accessible space will make it an ADA space. And then, like I said, based on the discussion tonight, I think we're gonna increase the size of that parking lot.
I'm just making sure which we're dealing with, 1 or 2 here.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question I have. Now, you've had talks with the Copley Whitehall Sewer Authority about this pressurized, low-pressure sewer main. Now, we have no way of knowing where those talks are at right now. But should that system not work, what's your game plan then?
There's part of the discussion that we've had with them, and, their consultants are very familiar with these type of systems and are fairly comfortable that this type of system is going to work.
There's none in the township at this point, I believe.
I believe you're correct, Phil.
There's none there. This is all new uncharted territory with the sewer authority.
Yeah, and
There are none there, so let's
Yeah.
not say that they're have a lot of experience with this.
No, but the consultant, Darrell Clark, has had quite a bit of experience with him and other authorities that he represents and stuff, and they were very specific on how they want the system designed and how they want it to work and stuff, based on the input they got from their consultant. And we're anticipating that there's gonna be a pretty extensive agreement, and they're gonna have a lot of input on the design of the system to make sure they work. There are a lot of these systems out there that have been functioning for years that do work properly if they're maintained properly.
There's been a lot of failure on them also.
Yeah.
Been a lot of failure.
They have to be maintained.
Been a lot of maintenance on them.
Is one of the things they were talking about, that they want to get into the agreement is that the requirement that there is a maintenance company on board for the system, and also there was some discussion about making sure that we use common pumps throughout the system, and that the homeowners association has a backup pump available in case there's a failure, so that the maintenance person can come right out and take the pump out, put a new pump in, and always have a pump there that the system will work.
Now, one of the problems with the HOA and this type of system that I see coming in the future, if this HOA fails, there's going to be 32 residents? 32.
Yes, 32.
Residents in here saying, we can't get rid of the sewage in our homes. Because the main pump up at the top that pumps into the sewer authority's pipe isn't working.
There's not gonna be one main pump. There's gonna be 32 pumps
pumping up
33
into a
pumps.
manifold, but not from that main manifold right into the sewer system at that point?
No, the
The
individual.
32 aren't going directly into the sewer system.
Yes, the 30,
They're going right in,
they go right into the force main, and then
They're
the
going
force main is going up.
into the force main,
There's no separate pump.
at the
other
force
than
main.
those at the force main.
Okay.
And the authority was very specific about that. They're only gonna take the gravity system.
Yeah, they're not gonna
take
put a
any-
pump station
Yeah,
in
they're
for
not
it.
gonna have anything to do with any of the
No.
pump stations.
But that's one of the problems I see with these HOAs, because when you start putting these, I'm gonna say extravagant sewer system, when you start doing these things and that HOA fails, the burden's on our authorities to make sure that people have sanitary conditions in their house. And we know these HOAs have failed. We've seen them fail here in Whitehall. We know they fail.
Yeah.
And, you know,
We're being
you're.
forced into more and more of them with our.
This is no different than gambling when you're dealing with an HOA. You're flat out gambling. You can lose at this.
Yeah.
It's a gamble. You know. All right, one last question. On this wet basin, convince me this is gonna work.
We've probably done about 20 or 30 of them already in the Lehigh Valley. When we got into the situation here in the Lehigh Valley where we needed to have infiltration, in most of the area that we do our work is in the carbonate areas where you have a high, probability of sinkholes. And talking about gambling, we are very concerned about doing infiltration basins. So what we wanted to do is find the most low-impact way of doing that. So what we do is we store the water, and then we go back and spray it out over the land the same way as you would get rainfall on the land. And like I said, we probably have about 20 or 30 systems that we've designed so far that are out there and functional, and so far they've been working fairly well, Phil.
So you're telling me that the standing water in this pond, which I think I heard is gonna be somewhere around 2 to 3 feet?
Probably more like 5 feet.
5 feet?
Yeah.
And you're going to constantly be spraying that water?
You're gonna constantly be irrigating that, aerating that water.
Are you just irrigating
You're gonna be
the
aerating.
pond itself, or
No,
are
no,
you
no.
spraying this water
You're
on the
also
land
gonna-
around?
You're also gonna have an irrigation system throughout the whole property, that where you're taking the water out of the pond and spraying it back over to satisfy the requirement, the PCSM, the post-construction
Mm-hmm.
stormwater management requirements.
So that water will be moving at all times?
Pretty much so during the months that it's operational, as.
But in
right
the,
now-
but in the wintertime, it freezes over and that's it?
Well, right now, DEP does not require us to operate the system between November and April. Originally, they did require us to do that, but during November and April, we just have a bypass facility in for that.
Okay. Now, I had taken it earlier, maybe I misunderstood it. I understood it as 2 to 3 feet of standing water.
There's, the recommendation for a wet pond, so that it could be healthy, is that you have like 3 or 4 foot of normal water, and then above that, we'll have maybe 2 or 3 feet for this post-construction stormwater. So that'd be variable. That'll vary, right after a rainfall event, it'll be filled
So-
up, and then we'll pump that down over like a 6-day period of time.
So the outlet of this pond will be up 5 feet above the base of this pond?
Approximately, yes.
So theoretically, you could have 5 feet of water in this pond at all
Yes.
times?
Yes.
Where did the 2 to 3 feet come from?
The 2 to
From
3 feet
earlier.
is the difference between what's the normal water elevation to have a viable pond and the post-construction stormwater management elevation. And that's still gonna be determined, that's gonna be based
So
on,
we have a wet summer like this summer, there's gonna be 5 feet of water in that pond,
at times, yes,
most of the time.
yes.
All right. Question for Frank, our engineer.
Yes, sir.
Do you think this type of pond will work?
It's a standard design that's used right now for post-construction stormwater management.
But you think it'll work? There's a lot of designs,
You
will it
have-
work?
It works or it doesn't, okay, that's gonna be determined during the calculations, all right? Again, you have infiltration rates in the surrounding soil, and that's a key item, and that has to be tested under our supervision. So once the infiltration rates are established, then you back yourself into the volume that you need to store, all right? And all those numbers start to accumulate, and that determines what size the volume you need for the pond in order to respray that back onto the surface. So you have this kind of a loop arrangement going on, and when the basin fills up with this, the needed storage, that'll have to sit there and, you know, be open to the sky. The water's stored there. And then when the conditions are right, the pumps engage and that sprays out on the lawns and whatnot in the common areas. That'll continue to happen until that basin's empty. In the meantime, if you get more rain, it fills that bottom part of the basin back up. So you're always guaranteed a certain volume of water that you're gonna respray on the ground until that water exhausts itself until the next storm. The rest of this design is more or less called, it's called a wet bottom design. So rather than having grass as the bottom of the pond like you see around here, you have water as the bottom of the pond. And from that water elevation, which is determined by the outlet structure, which is the pipe that's gonna lead under Mock Chunk, there's a certain volume of water that you're able to store to detain it and then let it out a little bit at a time after the storm event, or actually during the storm event, but it'll leave at a certain rate that's determined safe by the calculations. So the pond is actually doing two things. It's storing the water in the bottom part of it in order to irrigate and spray onto the common area. Then the area from the mean elevation of that water to the top of the bank, or thereabout, is the volume that you're gonna handle for stormwater control. So your stormwater management, which is your detention area. So that, we have that we have that arrangement already in the township up at Timber Ridge, all right, in one of the quarries up there above the Stroxel Steckle House. So it's not an unusual design, but what we're finding now, in order to accommodate this, with the post-construction stormwater management regulations, it's pretty much a common practice anymore that you combine the pond to provide the storage for the water that's gonna irrigate, as well as the stormwater management controls.
What about sinkholes with that type of wet bottom?
If you have them, you have them, you have to fix them. I mean,
It's not gonna speed them up.
well, it may if they're there. I mean, the sinkholes form from bottom to top. And we have Swiss cheese for geology in this whole area. The whole valley's like that. And if there's a sinkhole that's been working for the last several thousand years, if it's close to the surface, when you have that hydraulic load on top of it, it'll probably open up. And if that's the case, then you have to go in and fix it. You have to react to them. That's all you can do. I can't predict them, or I'd be in a, you know.
You wouldn't be here tonight.
I'd have a lot better car.
Have many other things to do.
But, again, you just react to them. If you have them, we have a way to fix them.
And Phil, these ponds are lined and they have to be designed to be lined, so you have a lot less risk.
What are they lined with? Clay?
These days, we're doing more of the PVC type liners and stuff. They're ending up being a lot more efficient.
And how long are these liners projected to last?
If they're installed properly, you know, they're covered and not subjected to UV light, they're pretty indefinite. If
How
you are
far
exposed.
from the bottom to the top of this pond? How far does this PVC liner come up?
We always require to have them at least a foot above the 100-year water surface elevation.
A foot above the 100-year.
Yeah.
That's gonna be pretty much to the top.
Yes, yeah.
So how do you keep the sunlight off it in dry years?
Well, you're covering it with a minimum of 12 to 18 inches of soil.
Okay? And I'm sorry, what kind of life expectancy out of these liners?
They're saying indefinite for if they're properly maintained.
Indefinite.
Yeah, but nothing's indefinite. But that's what they're claiming. But you keep in mind that.
I would never buy indefinite, let me tell you. I wouldn't. You couldn't sell me indefinite.
But our options here are to go with a typical type of infiltration basin where you don't have any liner, and those are very subjective to your sinkhole problems.
All right. Last question I have. I thought we were trying to head towards no detention. Get rid of this stormwater.
Well, we have
Did something change that I missed, or?
yep, the
Okay.
environmental regs have changed dramatically. You still have to retain a certain percentage of water to reintroduce that into the common area or the lawns or whatever. We have a traditional no detention in Whitehall Township where if the downstream conveyance can handle the extra water, we try to accommodate that and beat the peak. That's been a very dramatic program for the township. It's worked very well. We've eliminated a lot of flooding. We do have that argument constantly with DEP and the feds, and they don't seem to see it our way. So we're kind of stuck with all the regulations.
Could this pond, just thinking about this, if we took the homes on the west side, there's like 15 homes on the west side of this development. I'm sorry, on the north side. Couldn't those homes go into handling their own rainwater? And try and get some of this runoff water out of this pond? Is that a possibility? I know anything's possible.
I don't want to speak for.
This, I have grave concerns about this pond.
Well, the one benefit of the pond, and one of the things that we're finding with this post-construction stormwater management, I'll let Frank jump in here too, is we found that it's much better to have the stuff controlled by a group of people than one individual property owner. You know, if you have individual PCSM for each of these individual lots, then per your MS4 requirements and stuff, the township has to go out each year and check to make sure each of them are working. With one here, you're only doing one inspection as opposed to doing 32 inspections. I know, but I don't want to jump in.
Operationally, that's a definite big concern. The other item you're dealing with here is gravity. I mean, you generally try to get everything down to the low point, and you can manage it as one unit. And with the more you spread it out, it's a very intense kind of system and intense kind of calculations that are required to get this to work. We've done individual lots on individual systems on smaller lots. It's very cumbersome. And again, as Bud mentioned, you have to inspect them all the time. And then the people don't know what they have. You know, it's not their fault. They don't have the appreciation for the engineering and what the regulations are expecting you to do. And the homeowner doesn't realize they have to put a shed on top of this infiltration area, or they'll put a pool in instead. It's their property. They want to use it. And when you tell them, no, you can't do that because there's pipes underground that are putting the water back into the earth, you know, they're not very happy, and nobody told them that. So you get this combined effect of people that get very angry, and they don't see the value of, you know, returning the water back into the soil. So they just walk away from it or don't maintain it. So then the township is caused to go out and, hey, you have to maintain this, and it's becoming quite the problem as far as policing it, if you will. I don't like to use that word, but that's kind of what we're charged with doing.
Okay. Any other questions to the board or the mayor?
Just one question. What's the size of the pipe, the storm water pipe that's going underneath Mock Chunk Road?
I think that's a 36.
36?
I believe it is.
Okay.
30 or 36.
I think it's a
All right.
36 we put in there during
Yeah.
that construction.
We are gonna, we are going to be limited in our stormwater design that we can't increase the amount of water that's going to that pipe.
Right.
So, we're gonna have to live with what's there.
Frank, should I be scared about that?
About the size of the pipe?
Yeah,
No.
because there's
That's the controlling factor.
going to be collecting a lot of
So
water.
when we designed that system back, gosh, 93? Oof. I feel old. That system was, that pipe was designed to handle the drainage area that's coming to that point,
Okay,
all right? So when that was put in, it was already sized to accommodate the remaining area,
right,
so.
okay.
Anything else, Mayor?
No, thank you.
Anything else from the board? Can we go to public comment? Anybody from the public?
Mary Kay,
Please come forward, state your name and address.
Can we get a microphone over there, please?
Thank you. I'm Mary Kay McMahon. I'm the president and CEO of Fellowship Community, the adjoining property to this development. So I'm here representing that community, and we have some concerns, some of which you have voiced here today, but from our perspective, really want to have some opportunity to express those. The first one definitely has to do with the public access road, especially if it's from Ma-Chunk specifically, not as much from Schott Avenue, especially if it turns into a right-in, right-out access way, because during the heavy traffic areas on Ma-Chunk, it's very difficult, obviously, you know, to access that road under normal circumstances unless you're at a traffic light. So if it's a right-in, right-out, we have grave concerns that our property is going to be used as a turnaround so that people who want to go in the opposite direction can catch the light at Rural Road and come down. Occasionally, once in a blue moon, that happens now. I believe it's going to happen a lot more if that absolutely becomes a public access road. We also have concerns about that just related to the increased traffic. As someone on the panel has already mentioned, it is not just the property owners that live there. It's all their friends and family and visitors that will be coming to those homes. So it's just increasing a heavily traveled roadway already. So we have some experience with that as PennDOT, in a prior development on our property. We wanted to have an access road to Ma-Chunk, and we're not allowed to do that. So again, for all of those safety-related reasons and the increase in traffic. So want to definitely just express our concern related to that and what its downstream impact may have on our property and our community. The second thing is significant concerns about the sewer, the stormwater, and snow removal as well. And the fact that some of that is being controlled by an HOA. So you've already talked about that a little bit. What if the HOA fails? How is that going to be managed? When any of those systems fail, is that going to be backed up onto our property? The stormwater that's already coming, our stormwater drains through that property already, and if we're adding impervious surface to that portion of the property, what will that mean, for our drainage through that area? So we have significant concerns about the infrastructure and its potential negative impact on our property as well. The other things are the homes that border our property, their backyards will be bordering the property. So really want to know about if there's any plan to do fencing or a natural fence, delineation between this new development and our community as well. Because this development is going to be on that corner, and it is an age-restricted community, which is exactly what we are, how it looks and how it will be perceived as almost being part of our community, I think, to someone who doesn't know that it's a separate community. So in any way that we could delineate those lines, I think that would be important. Again, especially if the HOA fails, and how the property is maintained in the future comes under question. And then lastly, really about signage. For that reason, where is the signage for the new community? Is there going to be signage that delineates it as a separate development, and where would that be, and how is that going to look in relationship to our property as well? So those are some of the concerns that we have seriously about the public access road and the increase in traffic and safety concerns, and about the infrastructure and what it might, potential effects it may have on our community.
Would you care to address any of this resident's concerns?
Well,
We have to pass the
Microphone.
microphone back or use
Oh,
this.
sorry.
I guess on the access road, I don't know that there's much to add to that. In terms of increased traffic, the standard in a conditional use is not that there is an increase in traffic, but there is somehow an increase in traffic, which would be somehow different than a typical active adult community. And I think Mr. Newton mentioned that this is certainly less intense from a traffic standpoint than some other uses which have been contemplated there. And I guess I'll ask Mr. Newton a few questions concerning the concerns of the utilities and the border. So Mr. Newton, concern was mentioned, I believe, that if there's a failure of any of the systems, that there might be a backup onto the neighboring property. If there is some sort of storm or sanitary failure, would there be a backup onto the neighboring property?
No, we're the downhill property owner. We're more subject to issues as a result of their systems failing than they would be of our systems failing.
And I know you mentioned earlier there's no landscaping plan specifically designed as of yet. Is this, would we consider some sort of buffer or delineation along the northern property boundary?
That's a possibility.
But that's not an ordinance requirement?
That's correct.
And also in terms of signage, there's no specific signage required as part of the conditional use, correct?
Not that I'm aware of. There may, as of this point in time, we haven't really discussed, what type of community sign we may have out there. But, we certainly can add a community sign.
But certainly any sign would comply with the applicable
Zoning
provisions.
ordinances, yes.
Okay. That's all.
Thank you. I have no further comment. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak? Okay, any other comments from the board or the mayor?
No, thank you.
Attorney, any comments, Frank?
No, you were very thorough, thank you.
Okay. At this point, Mr. Secretary, please poll the board.
Commissioner Sloniker, no. Commissioner Clary,
Nay.
Commissioner Warren,
Nay.
Commissioner Fryman,
No.
and President Ginder.
No.
5 nays, 0 ayes. Thank you. We go to Chris.
Can I just move on while they're cleaning up? Yeah. Okay. Courtesy of the floor.
Okay, Madison Scarfaro?
There's hourly rates.
I was.
I do.
Yeah. To know if they got approval first. Is it under 25?
No, hold on.
Okay, well, we'll wait.
The thing yeah,
You're kidding me.
It's like looked up with land development. It's okay, I'll write a decision. Justify
It is. I like it.
How many you have, just the one?
Good seeing you again. Thank you. Good seeing you again.
This is a problem.
This is an open space, you can't move the park.
Right. There's no place to put, yeah, the speeding, building restriction line right there.
So you have all these things, what you say, the open space, you can't put the parking lot.
No, where are you gonna put it?
So you have this. you build-
Okay, Ms. Scafaro.
This truck going here on this.
So, I wanted to come in today and talk about the organization that I work for. It's called Marcy's Law for Pennsylvania. We're a statewide organization, and we are working on a legislative project that would take the statutory rights that crime victims have right now in Pennsylvania and elevate them to be included in the Pennsylvania State Constitution. So this includes the right to be notified if your offender's released on bail, the right to give a victim impact statement, the right to be notified about court proceedings, and a few more. To pass a constitutional amendment in Pennsylvania, you have to go through 2 legislative sessions consecutively. And so we've passed in both 2018 and 2019. Both times in the Senate was unanimous. And so now we will be on the ballot this November for all of Pennsylvania to vote on. So I just wanted to come here and kind of inform you a little bit more about what you'll be voting on in November. It's a bipartisan piece of legislation. We have support from local elected officials, statewide elected officials, and some members of the United States Congress. And, you know, all of our local senators and House members all support it as well, including a few local mayors. And so Marcy's Law started in 1983 in California when Marcy was stalked and killed by her ex-boyfriend. And about a week after, her mom and brother were in their local grocery store, and they didn't know that the offender was released on bail, and he approached them in the grocery store. So her brother took it upon himself to make sure that never happened to another family again. And so he started the nationwide effort called Marcy's Law for All. So this is for victims of all crime. So it ranges from sexual assault, rape, murder, burglary, you know, every crime that you can think of. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about that, see if anyone had any questions. We do offer presentations, speaking opportunities. If there's a local community group that would want us to come in and talk a little bit more, share some information, we have a bunch of materials to give out, and we also do trainings. So that training can be with police departments, other first responders, attorneys, and that kind of thing. The police departments, I'd say, are one of the most important to have a training at, because they are usually the first ones to be present when there is a crime committed. So does anyone have any questions for me?
First thing I'd like to say is young lady, thank you for getting involved in something. I think it's incredible.
Thank you.
And it's, good luck to you.
Thank you.
To be a young lady and get involved in something like this. The second question I have, where would these be sent? I don't see an address or anything on this.
So those are, and for whoever couldn't hear me, I have palm cards and information, and there's also a website. Sorry, I thought, I'm facing this way, so it's hard to hear back here. But I'll give you all information. I'll leave some out here for you to take, so you can visit our website and learn a little bit more. But just so I can repeat myself quickly, we will be on the ballot in November, and it's to elevate statutory rights into the Pennsylvania Constitution for crime victims. So the endorsement forms, can be signed, and I can either take them tonight or I can come pick them up sometime this week if you do want to sign an endorsement form. And then we just share them with our national team so they know where our support's coming from. And then we also have on our website a petition for people in the community to sign, just to show their support of Marcy's Law as well.
I have submitted a letter in support, and I wanted to congratulate Madison because she made a presentation in front of the State Mayors Association meeting this year and did a great job. And we all have to be proud of what she's doing in the community.
No question. So the board here is going to get a letter that we can support this, if we wish?
We can do that.
Would that help rather than individuals?
Yeah, I mean, either way is great. I was thinking if I came and, you know, presented it to you today, if you wanted to do like I don't know, if you do like a resolution of support, letter of support, that would be awesome. So
How does the board wish to handle this? Anybody have any ideas? Or mayor's suggestions?
Well, I think you can offer a motion to support this position. We'll put together a letter that can be signed on behalf of the board and send it off to her.
I think
So
that would
it's
mean more
pretty
than the
simple.
individual signatures of anybody
yeah, that would be great.
wanted to.
Yeah.
But does the board agree that,
I'll make that motion.
well, we just need to agree to,
Okay, I agree. Yeah.
No, I think a motion's a good
Motion,
idea.
yeah.
I recommend a motion authorizing the mayor to prepare a letter and send it on your behalf in support of Marcy's Law.
then make that motion in a second and off we go.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I also had,
Do it now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Jeff made the motion, I
We're gonna
think.
do that right now.
Because we may forget.
that's fine. That's okay.
Larissa will remind you when she puts the minutes together.
Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
There's your second. Mr. Secretary, poll the board.
Is there any questions?
Any questions on that?
Okay.
Mr. Secretary, poll the board.
Commissioner Warren?
Aye.
Commissioner Clary?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloniker? Aye. Commissioner Fryman?
Yes.
And President Ginder.
Yes.
Motion passes 5 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you ever so much.
Thank you very much. And then I did have one more thing. It has nothing to do with what I just spoke about, but it's a kind of like a fundraising idea that I thought I would share. So I was at another meeting in a different township, and they talked about putting a contest out to the community of their township. So ours would be Whitehall Township, and it would start maybe in the fall and end at the end of next summer. And people could submit pictures from around Whitehall, you know, the different parts of Whitehall throughout the different seasons, and then you would choose 12 winners to make a calendar then with those pictures, and then distribute or sell the calendars, so people could have a community calendar with different pictures from Whitehall. So I just wanted to relay that idea to you and see if that's something that you would be interested, or if a different organization might want to do that.
So are you suggesting that it could be or would be done by the township?
Yeah, I would. I mean, if that's something, I don't know if you can do a I guess like a fundraising type of thing like that. But, and then maybe for the 12 people who win, you know, they win like a gift card or a little prize, or, you know, something like that. But I thought it might be a good idea and something that would get the community involved, and then people could have nice calendars of Whitehall,
Boom.
nice pictures.
That's a great idea.
So.
What is the board, anybody on the board have any ideas to do with this? Anyone?
I think it's something we could talk about. Either the township doing it or Parks and Rec or something.
Well, that's part of us.
I know, but
Money
I'm,
counts too.
let them do the legwork. Tony's not here.
Wow.
He wins.
He wins. Okay,
Yep, with that, I'm all done. So thank you very much. I
thank
appreciate
you
it.
again. All right, presentation of the Public Safety Building.
We're gonna have you move a little to the side, or you'll.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You'll get hit by a, assuming it's still plugged in.
Where were you the night of?
Yep, you're still good.
Hang myself with the cord.
You're getting closer.
Still
I
tight.
was getting real damn close. If we looked a little uneasy before, the previous presenter was just mauling the cords and the chargers, and I was just waiting for the whole thing to blow up. Which it might have. There it comes.
It is, it's warming up.
It looked brighter before. Maybe it'll just it'll maybe warm up a little bit. It'll warm up a little bit more.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is an update. We're through design development on the public safety building, and so we wanted to bring the board up to date on where we're at and show you some additional pictures and give you some more information as we move into the construction design portion. So just as a reminder, these are the goals of this project: to reorganize that exterior site for safety, wayfinding, and a clear public-private separation. And of course, the Township Police and Administration buildings, we're looking to improve the operations and the efficiencies for the services, make sure it's user-friendly public service, of course, safety, and efficiently reorganizing of the records and equipment storage that's here on site.
All right, to that end, we represent to you something you've seen quite a while ago, and this is the site plan. In the interest of brevity, we're not going to dwell so much on the site plan features, because we have discussed that with the commissioners before, but really what's happened since we last saw you. The plan that you see before you is done kind of as a pretty picture, but there's been extreme amount of engineering to make the pretty picture an actual functioning site. We have been in front of approval agencies, including your planning commission, who did send a recommendation along to you for preliminary and final approval recommendation. We were thankful for that. We have been talking to the Soil Conservation District, as you talked to the previous people. That has to do with the stormwater. Just briefly, we are very, very much improving the stormwater issues on this site, because everything from here back now is 100% like that, total asphalt. So we are introducing 20% green back into this site, which will make a lot of help relative to stormwater and really make a lot of improvements to the runoff of this property. All those claims have to be backed with engineering numbers. We've been working with Frank in his office, and I think all those kind of things have been ongoing in the last couple months since we've seen you. The same is happening with the building. The floor plan is not new to you. The police, as they are before, are in a two-story building off to the left-hand side here, or if we're assuming this is the front of the building. We are having a common entry point, which will really help with the wayfinding, find out, where when you get out of your car, where are you going. We have labeled kind of schematically, the police are in blue, and the township functions that will be renovated or revised or worked on are kind of in this